the distance between notes. The auditorium was empty except for the janitor's distant footsteps and the girl sitting alone at the piano. Maya's fingers hovered above the keys, trembling. She'd frozen again during the recital, the third time this year. Her teacher had squeezed her shoulder afterward with a look that said everything, "Perhaps this isn't for you." But Maya couldn't let go. At 7 years old, she'd heard her grandmother play Chopin in their cramped apartment, each note somehow making their peeling wallpaper and water-stained ceiling disappear. When her grandmother's hands grew too arthritic to play, she'd pressed the apartment key into Maya's palm and whispered, "The piano is yours now. Don't let the silence win." That was 15 years ago. Since then, Maya had let the silence win more times than she could count. She worked double shifts at the diner, her fingers smelling of coffee and grease when she practiced late at night on her grandmother's upright. The action was stiff, several keys stuck, but she couldn't afford the repairs, let alone a real teacher. YouTube videos and library books became her conservatory. Her high school guidance counselor suggested dental hygiene programs. Her mother worried aloud about realistic plans. The summer she turned 19, Maya took a Greyhound to the city with $200 and a recording of herself playing Rachmaninoff, flawed but honest. She waited outside the office of Thomas Chen, a retired concert pianist who taught a handful of students. She waited 4 hours until he emerged. "I don't have time or openings," he said, not unkindly. "I don't have money," Maya replied. "But I can clean your studio. Organize your music library. Whatever you need." He paused at his car door. "Play something for me. Right now. Use your phone." She played from memory in the parking lot, her fingers moving over invisible keys while she hummed the piano part. She played the piece where she'd frozen during that recital a decade ago, but this time, she finished it. Thomas took her on. Not as charity, he insisted, but because he heard something in her humming that reminded him why he'd loved music in the first place. For 3 years, she cleaned his studio and he rebuilt her technique, note by note. He was exacting and sometimes harsh, but when she doubted herself, he'd say simply, "You're still here. That matters more than talent." The setbacks came in waves. A wrist injury that sidelined her for 6 months. The year she had to move back home when her mother got sick. The rejection letters from every scholarship and program she applied to, her late start and unconventional training working against her. But there were small triumphs too. A local restaurant that let her play weekend evenings. The regular customer who turned out to be a music professor and offered her audition coaching. The night she played through that cursed recital piece perfectly, alone in Thomas's studio at midnight, and felt her grandmother's hand on her shoulder though it couldn't possibly be there. When Thomas died suddenly of a heart attack, Maya nearly quit. He'd left her his piano, a beautiful Steinway that seemed to rebuke her every time she looked at it. She wasn't good enough for an instrument like this. She'd never be good enough. It was Thomas's daughter who found Maya sitting on the studio floor, surrounded by her teacher's sheet music. "He wrote you a letter," she said. "He updated it every few months. I think he always knew he might not have much time." The letter was 2 pages long, but only one line stayed with Maya, *, "You already are what you're afraid you'll never become. Now you just have to believe it as fiercely as I do *. She entered one last competition, the Gilman Emerging Artist Award. 26 years old, competing against prodigies who'd trained at Juilliard since childhood. She chose 3 pieces, the Rachmaninoff that had brought her to Thomas, a Chopin nocturne her grandmother had loved, and a contemporary piece by a living composer that reminded her of coffee-scented early mornings and stubborn hope. The day of the finals, Maya stood in the wings, watching a 17-year-old with flawless technique finish to thunderous applause. Her hands shook. She thought of every time she'd frozen, every rejection, every person who'd suggested she give up. She thought of her grandmother's arthritic hands. Thomas's parking lot audition. The distance she'd traveled between that empty auditorium and this moment. When she walked to the piano, she didn't sit down right away. She placed her hands on the fallboard, feeling the wood, the solidity of it. Then she began to play. She didn't win first place. But she won second, which came with a cash prize, a debut recital booking, and most importantly, the attention of a manager who specialized in artists with unconventional stories. 3 years later, Maya released her first album, a collection of pieces about persistence, recorded on Thomas's Steinway. The liner notes thanked her grandmother, her teacher, and everyone who needed more time than the world wanted to give them. She still works, though not at the diner anymore. She teaches now, specializing in older students and late starters. When they doubt themselves, she tells them about parking lots and hummed melodies and the extraordinary distance between silence and song. And sometimes, on difficult days, she opens Thomas's letter and reads it again. Not because she needs convincing anymore, but because she wants to remember what faith looks like, both the faith others held for her, and the faith she learned, slowly and painfully, to hold for herself. The piano sits in her small studio apartment, the same Steinway, now with fresh flowers on top where photographs of her grandmother and Thomas lean against each other. Maya plays every day, not chasing perfection, but honoring the journey that brought her here. She's learned that fulfilling a dream isn't about arriving somewhere as much as it's about refusing to abandon yourself along the way. The music was always there, waiting. She just had to last long enough to catch up to it.